Hello, and welcome to Cozy Bedtime, a snug little spot where evening stories and gentle relaxation lead the way to a peaceful night's sleep. Tonight, we share another soothing tale designed to calm your thoughts and invite a sense of comforting tranquility. But first, let's pause for a moment to prepare body and mind for rest. Find a comfortable position, and with each slow inhale and gentle exhale, imagine the day's worries drifting away. Detaching from daily busyness can be tough, especially as bedtime nears. But remember, the less we worry about falling asleep, the more easily our minds can release lingering tension. Allow the gentle rhythm of your breathing to wash away any leftover concerns, and let tonight's story guide you into deep relaxation. Now, settle in and let the warm, comforting atmosphere of cozy bedtime envelop you. Enjoy the story, and may your night be peaceful and restorative. Tucked into a corner by the window, Clara occupied a small bakery table, the late afternoon outside succumbing to a fitful temper. Along the Maine coast, autumn days dwindled noticeably, their brevity this stormy afternoon deepened by bruised clouds scudding low. Disoriented by the premature twilight, a few street lamps lining the thoroughfare beyond the glass had already flickered to life. Inside, the world Clara inhabited offered a stark counterpoint to the somber chill beyond the pane. Closing time loomed, yet the air remained thick with the solace of coffee and baking bread. The shop held few souls now, mostly locals snatching last-minute provisions. A woman vanished through the door, clutching a box of delicate cookies, destined, perhaps, for an intimate supper. Periodically, the coffee machine sighed steam, a mechanical guardian against the encroaching cold. Clara gazed through the window, her eyes tracing the storefronts, gleaming against the deepening murk. A town-wide competition seemed underway, judging by the whimsically garbed straw figures sheltered in doorways, cheerful sentinels warding off the season's end. They looked entirely at ease amidst the miniature cyclones of fallen leaves swirling in their alcoves, remnants of October's foliage surrendering to the wind. This coastal stretch was familiar territory, first explored in summer, while Clara delved into the history of the Rockland Breakwater Light. A devotee of lighthouses since childhood, she'd spent months intermittently tracing Maine's shoreline, visiting its storied beacons. That previous journey, however, had been curtailed. Obligations elsewhere had truncated her list. Discovering her route would bring her nearby once more felt like serendipity, a perfect chance for the long-anticipated visit to the Maine Lighthouse Museum before continuing onward. The nearby Owl's Head Light also beckoned, famed for possessing one of Maine's last operational Fresnel lenses, and, purportedly, a panorama of breathtaking beauty. The museum's website proclaimed it the nation's largest repository of its kind, housing an immense collection, lenses like captured stars, foghorns silenced by time, myriad historical apparatus. After months immersed in research, encountering these artifacts firsthand, absorbing the detailed chronicles felt profoundly satisfying. Models of renowned lighthouses she'd studied or stood before evoked a pleasant sense of recognition. Yet, as always, the narratives of the keepers, their lives interwoven with the lights, resonated most deeply. She had lost herself for a surprising duration within the exhibits, wandering in blissful solitude. The tourist tide had ebbed. Retrospectively, her timing was impeccable. Emerging from the museum's quiet warmth into wind-lashed streets had been jarring. Thus, she'd sought sanctuary here, in this bakery's embrace. Her lodging for the night, an inn outside town, wasn't ready for check-in. A cup of sweet milky tea provided the ideal pretext to linger in this charming local haven before venturing down the peninsula. The bell above the bakery door chimed brightly as a final customer waved farewell to the staff, slipping out into the sharp October air. Pulled from her thoughts, Clara knew her departure must soon follow. Taking another sip of tea, she retrieved a small notebook from her satchel, intending to refresh her memory on Owl's Head Light before tomorrow's visit. She nodded, scanning the details. Commissioned in 1825 under President John Quincy Adams, the lighthouse stood sentinel on a peninsula thrusting into Penobscot Bay, just east of Rockland. Like many early Maine lights, Owl's Head was initially constructed of rubble stone, a frugal choice. Predictably, it succumbed quickly to the elements, necessitating a rebuild with sturdier brick in 1852. The tower itself was diminutive, a mere 30 feet tall, yet perched atop a bluff nearly 100 feet above the sea. Its beam commanded a significant reach across the bay. The modest fourth-order Fresnel lens, installed post-renovation, proved sufficient, casting its light some 18 miles over the water. Clara recalled from previous excursions that Fresnel lenses varied dramatically in scale. This was no giant. Draining the last of her tea, Clara set the notebook down. The little lighthouse's history seemed straightforward. Primarily, it was the vista she anticipated. A quote attributed to Samuel Adams Drake, discovered in his book, The Pine Tree Coast, had captivated her. Owl's Head ushers at once upon a scene almost too beautiful to profane with speech. When we are looking at it, impossible to find language to do it justice. Whether this held true amidst late autumn's dun austerity remained to be seen, but she resolved to witness it herself come morning. Clara folded the notebook, tucking it away. Rising almost reluctantly from her snug window perch, she cleared her table, donned her warm coat, and wound a soft scarf around her neck. Pushing open the door, she stepped back into the brisk air. Now, nearly all the street lights concurred on the lateness of the hour, casting a soft, sequential glow along the pavement. She walked past the Vintage Theater's neon marquee to where her car waited. Gratefully, she slid into the driver's seat's relative warmth, placing her bag beside her. The engine hummed reassuringly, heat whispering from the vents as she initiated the navigation, aiming the vehicle toward her night's refuge. The bed and breakfast lay nearby. Driving south, leaving the town behind, she passed a turnoff she recognized as the route to the lighthouse. Tonight, however, the allure was simply warmth and shelter. Glimpses of the harbor flickered to her left before the road curved inland, flanked by dense thickets. A weathered sign, barely decipherable in the failing light, announced her entry into a town that grew from sea and stone. Perhaps 10 minutes later, she arrived amidst a small constellation of houses and businesses clustered around a cove. Navigation proved essential. Addresses were difficult to discern in the near-total darkness. Nevertheless, she located the correct driveway on her first attempt, pulling into an empty space. She might, she mused, be the sole guest. Opening the car door into the strengthening wind, Clara retrieved her overnight bag from the trunk. Bowing her head against a gust, she hurried onto the covered porch and pushed open the heavy front door. Hauling her luggage inside, she pulled the door shut, instantly sealing out the autumn chill. She paused in the entryway, catching her breath. The house felt old, possibly a former farmhouse, she speculated. Not grand, but undeniably cozy. Her gaze fell upon the rustic, wide floorboards beneath her boots, then shifted through a nearby doorway into a living room where flames danced in a hearth. A small desk stood before her, bearing a bell. Before she could ring it, footsteps approached rapidly from the rear of the house. A woman emerged, casually clad in jeans and an apron, looking as though she'd just stepped from the kitchen. A broad smile illuminated her face as she introduced herself as Martha, welcoming Clara with a polite apology for her informal attire. Clara reassured her, laughing, that formal dress was hardly expected, reinforcing her suspicion that this was indeed the inn's quiet season. The atmosphere was pleasingly relaxed. Martha led Clara upstairs, showing her to a room. "You're our only guest tonight," she explained, "so I gave you the big room with the pretty view." Clara expressed her thanks, anticipating the morning revelation beyond the windows. Her host then invited her downstairs for a light supper once settled. With no one else expected, Martha added, "I thought you might enjoy eating by the fireside. Does that sound appealing?" It sounded utterly perfect, Clara confirmed. With that, Martha departed, closing the door softly behind her. Clara surveyed her room. It clearly possessed excellent windows, though the current darkness veiled any hint of the promised vista. Drawing the curtains against the night, she absorbed the welcoming space. A queen-size bed dominated the center, adorned with a patchwork quilt and crisp white linens. Hardwood floors, mirroring those downstairs, added warmth, softened by an oval braided rug. An antique chest of drawers stood nearby, crowned by a charming old lamp casting a golden circle of light. Dainty floral wallpaper covered the walls. The room felt both spacious and snug, an ideal sanctuary. She looked forward to reading in bed after her meal. Tidying her wind-tousled hair in the mirror, she unpacked a few essentials, then decided to descend. Hunger was mild, but the fireside beckoned irresistibly. Book in hand, she left her temporary haven, the stairs creaking faintly beneath her tread as she returned to the living room. Plush armchairs and a small sofa clustered invitingly around the fireplace. Clara chose one, sinking gratefully into its depths, drawn to the gently capering flames. The room was tastefully appointed, with bookcases and intimate furniture groupings suggesting quiet conversation. A bay window presumably overlooked the street, though night obscured the view. Street lights were sparse in this small riverside hamlet. After a few moments, Martha reappeared, offering dinner options. Clara gratefully accepted the suggestion of seafood chowder and a green salad, promising a swift return with a tray. Martha vanished once more. Clara leaned back, embraced by the armchair, and closed her eyes. The room's only sounds were the rhythmic ticking of a nearby grandfather clock and the fireplace's soft crackle. Faintly, she could hear Martha moving about in the kitchen, opening and closing cupboards. She was fortunate Martha returned promptly. Relaxation threatened to pull her into sleep. Just before she succumbed, a tray materialized before her, bearing steaming soup, oyster crackers, and a delicate salad. While the chowder cooled, Clara inquired if Martha would be dining as well. Martha explained she'd eaten earlier, but settled into a chair opposite Clara, asking about her morning plans. Breakfast, she reminded Clara, was included. During the discussion, Clara mentioned her lighthouse visit, expressing hope for clear skies. Martha nodded, affirming the trip's merit. Of course, this time of year, you'll only see the exterior, Martha cautioned. No tours tomorrow. She paused, a twinkle in her eye. But the legends, they're the best part. Clara paused, spoon hovering. Legends? She echoed, intrigued. Such as? Martha leaned forward. You mean to tell me you came all this way without knowing about the ghosts? Clara's extensive research had covered histories, keepers, even equipment specifications, but hauntings were news. Fascinated, she broke open her cracker packet and prompted Martha to elaborate. Settling back, Martha nodded, clearly relishing the request. With the fire painting shifting light and shadow and the wind keening at the windows, she began. The thing is, Martha commenced, both spirits haunting the lighthouse are quite helpful. Anyone familiar with keepers and their dedication knows they viewed their duties with utmost seriousness. Nothing deterred them, regardless of obstacles. For some, it seems that devotion extended beyond life. Two benevolent entities still watch over Owl's Head Light. The first is a former keeper, though his precise identity remains uncertain. Clara realized she held a spoonful of chowder midair. She finished the bite, momentarily distracted by the soup's exquisite flavor. Swallowing the rich broth, she dipped her spoon again, awaiting the continuation. With perfect timing, her host resumed. Tales abound of footprints discovered in the snow leading to the lighthouse, workmen's boot prints. Now, you might think, so what? Anyone could walk there. But here's the peculiarity. The tracks only ever lead to the tower, never away. Martha spread her hands for emphasis. And upon following these one-way prints, astonished keepers have found the brass gleaming and the lens meticulously polished. Clara recalled all she'd learned about the sacrosanct nature of daily maintenance. Such spectral assistance, she knew, would indeed signify a most obliging spirit. But Martha hadn't finished with the ghostly keeper. In the 1980s, she continued, a family lived at Owl's Head Light, including their 2-year-old daughter Claire. Her father reportedly found her out of bed one night, whereupon she earnestly declared, "Fog's rolling in, time to put the foghorn on." Anyone acquainted with toddlers knows they absorb odd phrases. Yet the keeper and his wife swore they'd never uttered such words near Claire. The warning sprang seemingly from nowhere. Martha raised a finger. Furthermore, for years within the keeper's house, young Claire casually mentioned the presence of a bearded man in a blue coat and seaman's cap. Clara realized her chowder bowl was empty, consumed almost unconsciously. She sheepishly placed her spoon beside the crumpled cracker packet. The spectral keeper was compelling, but curiosity about the second spirit now simmered. Martha didn't delay. Naturally, anyone versed in lighthouse lore understands that running a station often required the aid of wives, even children. Clara nodded. Her research confirmed this unequivocally. Martha pressed on. There's a benevolent presence many call the Little Lady, seemingly devoted to housekeeping at Owl's Head. Apparently, she enjoys rattling silverware in the keeper's house kitchen and has been linked to doors opening and closing inexplicably. Martha shrugged, conveying impartiality. A keeper in the late 80s reported his wife seeing a woman in a white dress gazing from the windows, while their son insisted a lady frequented a chair in his room. People say she imparts a peaceful feeling. Her presence isn't unwelcome. Clara contemplated the two accounts. And after the 1980s, the light was automated, she mused aloud. So there's no one living there now to confirm if the ghosts remain? Martha nodded again, approvingly. Precisely. For all we know, those spirits maintain the only round-the-clock vigil to this day. Having finished her lovely salad, Clara leaned back, folding her napkin on the tray. Martha paused, asking if she'd care for hot cider. Clara agreed enthusiastically, and her host carried the tray toward the kitchen. Sinking deeper into her seat, Clara watched the mesmerizing flicker in the hearth, a warm languor beginning to settle in her limbs. Martha returned bearing 2 steaming mugs, the delicious aroma of spiced apples preceding her. Placing a cup beside each of them on a small table, she resumed her seat. Of course, she began anew, my absolute favorite Owl's Head story isn't ghostly at all. It features a truly heroic dog named Spot. At this, Clara's eyes widened. She lifted her cider, blowing gently to cool it, pausing to inhale the comforting, spicy fragrance with closed eyes before asking Martha about Spot. her host obliged readily. During the 1930s and 40s, the keeper lived there with his family, including 2 daughters, Millie and Pauline. Legend holds they trained their Springer Spaniel, Spot, to ring the fog bell by pulling its rope whenever a boat passed. It became routine for vessels to answer with their own bell or horn. Spot particularly favored the mail boat from Matanicus Island. The mailman, Stuart Ames, was known for bringing treats. The dog invariably responded to that boat's unique engine sound. Well, one ferocious winter night, a blizzard buried the fog bell mechanism in deep snowdrifts. Simultaneously, the mailman desperately needed that bell to navigate clear of the rocks at the cliff base. As the story goes, hearing the mailboat's engine, Spot scratched frantically at the door to be let out. He raced to the shore and commenced barking furiously. The mailman managed to whistle back, using the sound to steer safely around the treacherous rocks. Thus, Spot became a hero. He's no ghost, but he's immortalized at the lighthouse. A plaque commemorates him there. Such a very good boy. Martha smiled at the memory of the plucky spaniel sipping her cider. Clara smiled too, savoring the last of her own warm drink before setting the mug down. Leaning her head back, she regarded the fireplace thoughtfully. "I'm so glad I heard these stories before visiting," she told Martha. "And to think, all I was anticipating was a view." Martha chuckled. "You'll likely have the place entirely to yourself this time of year," she said. "You can visit Spot's memorial in peace. And the weather forecast looks promising for tomorrow." Both women glanced towards the rattling window panes, sitting in companionable silence for a moment, the old house creaking comfortably around them. Sensing the perfect moment for withdrawal, Martha rose, collecting their empty mugs. She informed Clara that warm muffins and fruit would await her in the kitchen any time after 7 the next morning. With a kind nod and a wish for a good night, she vanished towards the back of the house once more. The fire's warmth and the chair's embrace made the ascent to her bedroom seem daunting. Yet, the comfortable bed beckoned. Eventually, Clara roused herself from the sitting room and quietly climbed the stairs. The hour wasn't excessively late, but the profound darkness and wild weather outside lent bedtime an extra allure. After changing into pajamas and brushing her teeth, Clara gratefully pulled back the cheerful quilt, sinking into the crisp white sheets. The bed was immensely comfortable. She tucked the covers snugly under her arms, stretching luxuriously toward the foot of the mattress with a contented sigh. She attempted to read, but the words soon blurred. Within minutes, wakefulness conceded defeat. Switching off the lamp, she drifted away on a tide of dreams, lulled by the gentle percussion of tree branches against the window pane. That night, Clara dreamt vividly of her pilgrimage to the small white sentinel of Owl's Head Light. In slumber's realm, she awoke to a sun-drenched autumn morning. Her dream window revealed a glittering river flowing towards the Gulf of Maine beyond the sleeping village. sunlight scattering like diamonds upon the deepest blue water imaginable. In this luminous dream, she descended to a sun-washed farmhouse kitchen where a basket of warm, crumb-topped muffins awaited beside a steaming mug of coffee. She savored each bite, the burst of blueberries mingling with the pearl sugar crust, the coffee's fragrant steam rising through sunbeams, fortifying her against the imagined crispness outside. Then, with the fluid logic of dreams, she was abruptly seated in her car, luggage neatly stowed, driving north along the road to Owl's Head State Park. Dense stands of trees flowed past, evergreens interspersed with deciduous skeletons clinging to their final russet leaves. Sunlight, finding new pathways through the bared branches, eagerly claimed its winter territory. Nearing her destination, the harbor waters sparkled to her left, small boats purposefully chugging away from the town. And then, arrival. She parked in a lot utterly devoid of other visitors. Stepping into the sharp October air, Clara followed a wide gravel path. To one side, the ground fell away, confirming her elevated position on the promontory. To her right, glimpses of the bay flashed between trees, promising the imminent sweep of the vista. The lighthouse materialized before her. A neat keeper's cottage stood to the left, while the bright white brick tower of Owl's Head Light crowned a steep incline. Stairs climbed sharply to meet it, an invitation ascending towards the heavens. Slowly, she reached the summit and turned, a sigh of pure contentment escaping her lips. The panorama unfurled, as magnificent as hoped. The hillside grasses, faded to autumnal gold and rust, yielded to the craggy headland plunging into the water. Beyond lay a churning expanse of aqua and sapphire, stretching horizon to horizon. In the distance, through dissipating morning mist, land masses emerged, peninsulas or islands, their identity unknown to Clara. What she knew with certainty in that breathtaking, crystalline moment carried on the bracing salt breeze was that she was becoming part of Owl's Head's enduring story. Drifting effortlessly through the dreamscape, she lingered, perhaps a minute, perhaps an hour. Eventually, she found herself before a simple stone marker inscribed, "Spot, the lighthouse dog." Reading the plain words, etched forever onto this isolated hillside above the sea, Clara smiled inwardly just before waking, imbued with a comforting conviction that this unassuming beacon would forever possess faithful guardians watching over its light. Kenjiro, whose days were etched in the rhythm of soil and seed, worked his modest patch of earth near the village fringe. One afternoon, the heavens wept abruptly, a sudden downpour chasing him and his fellow tillers from their labors. With shared laughter echoing against the drumming rain, they sought refuge beneath the sprawling arms of an ancient cedar, its canopy a vast living roof. Safe within this dry haven, talk turned easily to an early meal. As raindrops patterned the leaves overhead like gentle fingers, they shared food and drink, falling into the comfortable, meandering currents of conversation known only to longtime companions. Amidst Kenjiro's quiet enjoyment of his meal, a tiny flicker of life, a butterfly with wings like painted silk, danced in from the gray wetness to alight upon his knee. His hand instinctively rose to brush it away, but a gesture from Elder Isao, his weathered face serene, stayed him. "That," the old man murmured, his voice soft as moss, "is said to be a vessel for the human spirit. When we slumber, our souls roam the world thus, weaving the fabric of dreams." A curious notion, Kenjiro mused. Belief felt distant, yet he let the delicate creature rest undisturbed. Moments later, glancing down, he found it had vanished as silently as it arrived. Soon, warmed by broth and filled with sticky rice, a deep contentment settled over Kenjiro. He leaned his head against the immense, textured trunk of the cedar. The low hum of friendly chatter nearby became a lullaby, carrying his thoughts adrift. Before he knew it, sleep claimed him utterly. He surfaced slowly, drawn back towards wakefulness. How pleasant, he thought drowsily, to sleep beneath such a tree, the clean fragrance of cedar perfuming the damp air. But as Kenjiro lay nestled against the rough bark, a stillness registered. The familiar cadence of his friends' voices had ceased. He opened his eyes. He was utterly alone amongst the gnarled, exposed roots of the colossal tree. No one. Only the persistent drip, drip, drip of water falling from leaf to patient leaf broke the quiet. His friends must have simply returned to the fields, he reasoned, leaving him to his rest. Yet, scanning the surroundings, he saw no sign of them. A thin mist now accompanied the rain, veiling the distance, swallowing the familiar landscape. With each passing second, the fog seemed to coalesce, thickening into an opaque curtain. Kenjiro peered into its depths. From the densest part of the white shroud, indistinct shapes emerged, moving towards him. A procession, it seemed. As they drew nearer, their forms sharpened, revealing figures utterly unlike his farming comrades. No peasant ever wore such shimmering silks, secured raven hair with pins of gold, or trod the earth in sandals so intricately wrought. Recognition dawned swiftly. Royalty. Kenjiro scrambled upright, bending low in a profound bow. The leader, an older man whose eyes held a lively sparkle, approached and bade Kenjiro rise. Such deference was unnecessary, he explained. They were emissaries, dispatched by the Queen of Tokoyo herself. They sought his aid in a matter of grave importance. Straightening, Kenjiro absorbed the full spectacle of the entourage. Each attendant was clad in robes of crimson and gold silk that whispered with every slight movement. Their hair, uniformly black as polished obsidian, was sculpted into elaborate arrangements. An exquisite perfume hung about them, an invisible cloud woven from scents Kenjiro had only dreamed of. Cinnamon, clove, and cardamom mingled with the sweetness of hibiscus, lilac, and jasmine, sharpened by notes of orange and pomegranate. It was as if the very air announced their nobility. What could such an august company possibly require of him? A mistake, surely, he protested. He was merely Kenjiro, a man of the soil. Yet, if they had journeyed so far, he would offer what little he could. The old man smiled, a warm, reassuring expression. No mistake, he affirmed. The queen had specifically requested Kenjiro. They beckoned him to join them. Though bewildered, Kenjiro found their certainty compelling, their purpose undeniable. He acquiesced. They granted him a moment's privacy to exchange his rough-spun clothes for robes of deep blue and shimmering silver, their traditional attire for a guest of the queen. As he donned the garments, Kenjiro had to concede, if they were mistaken, their intended recipient must be his double. The robes fit as though tailored precisely for his frame. Thus began the journey towards the queen, Kenjiro trailing in their wake, enveloped in wonder. He ran his fingers over the silk of his new robes as they walked. Impossibly light, impossibly soft, he expected little warmth against the damp fog. Yet it cocooned him better than his thickest tunic. Even the sandals felt like treading on air. Lost in the unfamiliar luxury, he barely registered their passage until they stood before a palace of breathtaking scale. Guards in crimson and gold armor swung open massive gates, admitting them into a realm beyond his imagining. The queen's chambers overflowed with treasures that defied Kenjiro's simple understanding. Tapestries, woven with threads so fine they seemed painted by light, depicted pivotal moments from the kingdom's chronicles. Every inch of the floor lay hidden beneath plush rugs, soft furs, or exquisite bamboo mats crafted with unparalleled skill. High above, the ceiling was a constellation of delicate glass panes. Kenjiro pictured himself lying there at twilight, watching the stars ignite one by one through that crystalline expanse. The queen herself wore robes of the purest cream, a fabric so luminous it seemed to generate its own soft radiance, unlike the reflected sheen of his own silks. Crimson threads embroidered across its surface formed clusters of small, round lychee fruits, rendered with such startling realism that Kenjiro felt his mouth water despite himself. Then the queen spoke. Her voice was a low murmur, yet it resonated with undeniable authority, carrying clearly through the silent chamber. They had observed him, she explained, for quite some time. His affinity for the earth, his skill and cultivation were exceptional. He was precisely the individual needed to breathe life back into a certain jewel of her domain, the Isle of Sazanami, blessed with rich soil and diligent folk, yet lately fallen into hardship. The entire kingdom would be indebted, she declared, if Kenjiro would consent to serve as its governor. Overwhelmed, knowing no other course, he accepted with humble grace. The queen smiled. Her choice, she knew, was sound. Kenjiro spent the ensuing days within the palace walls, preparing for his voyage to the island nestled midstream in a wide, placid river. The shock of his fortune lingered, yet the demands of preparation left scant time for reflection. At last, the day of departure dawned. Accompanied by several advisors, Kenjiro embarked. Their journey traversed landscapes that felt like the whole breadth of the land: rolling hills, verdant fields, bustling towns, and quiet hamlets. The final stage required crossing the great river aboard a handsome wooden vessel, its sails billowing, white and pure as the queen's own robes. On the ship's deck, Kenjiro finally allowed his mind to quiet. Standing at the prow, he closed his eyes, feeling the gentle sun warm the backs of his hands. The fresh breeze sifted through his hair, strands dancing lightly against his face. Avian calls stitched the air above the soft lapping of water against the hull. The serene, rhythmic rocking reminded Kenjiro of his simple hammock back home, swaying in the summer air. Soon, the Isle of Sazanami emerged from the haze, a green promise on the water. The ship navigated towards the dock. The moment Kenjiro stepped ashore, he felt the truth of the queen's words beneath his feet. The earth was yielding, damp, alive. Tall, luxuriant grasses carpeted the island, and magnificent trees cast cool, dappled shade. His advisors guided him towards the governor's residence. As they approached, they offered apologies for its modest scale compared to the splendors of the palace. But Kenjiro, who had known only the confines of his family's farmhouse, stood speechless. Smaller than the queen's abode, yes, but it possessed numerous rooms furnished with deep, inviting chairs, soft carpets, and a vast bed piled high with feathers. He would be content here, Kenjiro knew instantly. And indeed, he was. Though initially daunted by his duties, over the first year he came to know the islanders, their ways, their hopes. Working alongside them, they coaxed forth the first truly bountiful harvest the island had seen in over a decade. To mark this triumph, Kenjiro hosted a magnificent feast, ensuring every single citizen shared in the celebration. Thus, the seasons turned. 15 years flowed past under his stewardship, transforming the Isle of Sazanami into a haven. Wild woodlands were gently tamed into orchards, yielding the sweetest plums, cherries, and pears imaginable. Once fallow fields now produced more rice and grain each year than the island could possibly consume. The surplus diligently sent across the river to nourish the wider kingdom. As governor, Kenjiro earned the deep affection of his people. He mediated disputes with fairness and gentle humor, orchestrated joyous celebrations for life's milestones, and still found moments to return to the fields, his hands finding solace in the familiar work of farming. Then, one day, a messenger arrived from the queen. An attendant, disembarking from a sleek boat, informed Kenjiro it was time to return whence he came. His contributions, the attendant assured him, would be forever remembered by the queen and the islanders alike. Sadness touched Kenjiro. This place had become a true home. That evening, however, his advisors surprised him with a farewell feast, surpassing all previous celebrations in its joyous abandon of food, drink, and dance. When the last echoes of merriment faded, and the final guest departed, Kenjiro sought his bedchamber. He sank into the immense feather mattress, feeling it embrace him like a warm cloud. Consciousness began to fray, drifting towards sleep. But first, he cast one last look upward. Upon his arrival, he had requested a single alteration to his chambers. Small, delicate windows set into the ceiling, portals to the night sky. Gazing up now, he watched the stars prick the darkness, distant and serene. Within moments, sleep enveloped him. The following morning, the Queen's attendant escorted him to the dock. The boat waited, silent upon the water, poised for the return journey. Kenjiro took a final, lingering look at the island. The thriving orchards, the fertile fields, the prosperous village shimmering in the distance. The anchor was raised. As they pulled away from the shore, a fog began to unfurl across the water. It was dense, yet strangely, not cold. It felt warm, soft, like finest cotton. Soon, visibility shrank to mere feet. Kenjiro closed his eyes against the white embrace. When he opened them again, the boat was gone. He was back beneath the giant cedar. His friends gathered around him. He blinked, disoriented, running his hands through the familiar soil, still cool and damp from the earlier rain. One of the farmers chuckled at his bewildered movements. "Enjoy your nap, Kenjiro?" he inquired. Slowly, Kenjiro asked, "How long? How long was I asleep?" The farmer eyed him curiously. "Only a few minutes. 10, perhaps?" Then Kenjiro recounted everything. The regal procession emerging from fog, the Queen's luminous chamber, the Isle of Sazanami, 15 years of governance. The others listened, rapt, to his extraordinary tale. When he finished, breathless, he asked them, what could it possibly mean? Puzzled murmurs arose as the farmers debated the strange dream. Before they could reach any conclusion, a quiet voice interjected. It was Elder Isao, he who had spoken of the butterfly. His tone was as soft as wind sighing through tall grass. He had watched Kenjiro doze against the tree, he said. At the precise instant sleep took him, a small yellow butterfly had fluttered from Kenjiro's tunic near his heart. The other men nodded. They recalled seeing the butterfly, though not its origin. Elder Isao continued. Kenjiro's butterfly had settled briefly on the cedar's bark before several ants approached it. Gently, purposefully, they had grasped the tiny creature and carried it down into a small opening at the base of the massive trunk. Mere minutes later, the butterfly reappeared from the same hole and flew directly back into Kenjiro's tunic. This happened just moments before Kenjiro stirred and awoke. Perhaps, the old man suggested gently, this explained the vision of a procession leading him away and his time on the island. Kenjiro and the others exchanged glances. There was one way to be certain. Carefully, together, they eased away the soil near the cedar's base. There, nestled amongst the roots, lay a miniature world, an ant colony, and within it, a section struck Kenjiro with dizzying familiarity. A patch of earth cloaked in vibrant green moss. The recent rain had carved a tiny channel around it, creating the perfect semblance of an island surrounded by water. And floating in that minuscule stream, drifted a delicate boat fashioned from twigs and bark. Reverently, the farmers replaced the earth, careful not to disturb the tiny inhabitants further. By now, the rain had ceased entirely. After a few more moments of quiet reflection, the men dispersed, returning to their fields. But Kenjiro carried that day within him forever. For the rest of his life, he would recall his time as governor of the island with a quiet fondness. Each day, as he guided his plow, scattered seed, and gathered the harvest, the sun's warmth on his back would evoke the memory of silk robes. Every bite of fruit held an echo of sweetness from the island's orchards and celebratory feasts. And every passing breeze seemed to carry the faint, clean scent of the wide river encircling his other home. And it need hardly be said that before Kenjiro finally left the shade of the great cedar that afternoon, he placed half of his remaining lunch near the entrance to the ant colony, a silent offering, a final gift of gratitude to his hosts for a most wondrous adventure spun from a dream.